Hello everyone. This video is in response to a comment that I got from a user that was getting frustrated with learning Sketch, Extrude Sketch, Revolve Sketch, and I get it. It's a bit of an adjustment getting to know and learn these new tools. So I came up with a list of tips or tricks or things to consider for the new user that's just trying to wrap their head around Revolve Sketch and Extrude Sketch. So here we go. All right, here is our first tip. Let's just bring out an extrude sketch out here. Let's open this up. All right, so let's start plotting down some points, shall we? And I'm going to do something like this. And let's say I make a mistake here and I accidentally plot a point down here. Now, there's a couple of things you can do. You can try to delete this right now or just continue on your way and remove the point or edit the point later. But let's say you want to delete this. Now you might come down here and click on this because that's clear. But when you do that, you clear the entire thing and that is so frustrating. I've done that so many times. So we're going to, let's create something similar again. Here's my shape. I'll make a mistake. When you get to this, if you're using a computer, laptop, hit the backspace, delete. And that should allow you to get rid of that point. And if you keep on clicking on that, you can move your way backwards like this. This has saved me so much frustration, but again, it's something that I had to get used to doing, and now that I've got it, I do it all the time. Backspace or delete on your keyboard should do the trick. All right, the next tip. As I said before, as you're plotting out points, and you make a mistake somewhere or you realize that, oh, I should have added a point here, you can delete back by using the delete key or backspace key, or you can just keep on plotting points and just know that you can edit them later. Now, this is where it can get a little bit confusing because you're like, well, where can I do that? How can I actually do this? Because every time I could try to do this, I can move this entire thing, but I can't get at those points. This is the other important thing to understand about the sketch tool is that there are two levels in which you are editing your shape here. Currently right now, because I don't see those individual points, you're now editing this as one complete shape. So that's the reason why I can click on this area in the middle here and I can move this thing around, or I can do stuff like I want to make this actually more like a line with some width built across it, so I can turn this on and edit it that way. But again, all of these changes that I'm making are to the shape overall. But I don't want that. I just want to edit these points. So how do I do that? If you double click on this, you'll notice that those points reappear. The other way to do this is actually to click here, and it's the Edit Modify Selected Shape. And once you do that, now all of a sudden you have those points reappear. And notice what happens down here. I've now got these options down here that were not there before, and I have the option here to add and remove points. So for me to do this, I can just go here and I can add a point in like this. And if I want to move it around, just be aware you need to actually select this, select and move option so that you can take this and move it around. I've done this so many times before where I want to add in a point and then immediately after adding in that point, I want to move it. So I just click it again. But in doing so, I just delete it because I'm still in the mode of adding and removing points. You want to toggle over to this option over here. Select and move. So again, if I just want to edit the points, I can just click on this shape and it should reintroduce those individual points. And one of the things you can do is something like I want to take this and I want to turn this into a smooth curve. Fantastic. And what I love about that is I have the handles here to do that. The only problem is sometimes I end up having these numbers get in the way and I just want to get at this handle and the numbers get in the way. Just click on this over here. Shift D allows you to hide those measurements so that you can get at any point or any of these handles or parts of your sketch without getting interfered with by those measurement numbers. Shift D again brings those numbers or measurements back. Another quick tip, don't forget that while you are in this mode where you can edit these individual points, you can select by dragging across here and selecting a whole bunch of different points. And while they're selected, you can move them around together. You can go ahead and change how those lines pass through those points by making them either broken handles or smooth curves, or let's just make them back to straight corners. Another thing to be aware of as you're working with Sketch are the increments that you have set down here in the bottom right. Now, by default, it does set that to 1 millimeter, which is great because if I take this point here and move it around, it will move and snap to the grid 1 millimeter at a time, which is great because that matches up perfectly to the grid lines that I have here. So I actually like that. Now, because I have my point showing here, if I go to my menu on the left, I can toggle on this and I can add a point. And you'll notice that when I'm in this mode of adding a point, I've lost the ability to snap to that grid. So this becomes tough because you might want it to sit on a specific line or grid point, and you can't do that. Don't worry, just lay it down as close as you can. So let's say right there, and then you can reposition that point and it will snap to that grid. But just be careful, make sure you select and move. And then when you grab that point, it will snap back to those millimeter increments or whatever increments you have set down here at the bottom right. Now, those increments also become important as you start to do things like I'm going to select this point and I'm going to make this a smooth curve. And I have those handles there to help me out with this. And you're going to notice that as I move these handles around, those handle ends will snap to my grid, which is great, but it does limit you in terms of how this curve is going to shape because you're kind of snapping to these different points. If you want a finer degree of control over this, you are going to have to go to your increments down here and lower that number or turn it off altogether. And you're going to notice you're going to have much better control over how that line is going to bend because it's not snapping to every millimeter. And you can shape it any way that you want. All right, so I don't know if this is a tip or trick, but it's something to be aware of as you're building and designing. Let's make an open path sketch here. So I'm going to do a simple 2x2 shape here, and I'm going to select Create Open Path to finish it there. Now, what has happened here, you can see I've got a 2 centimeter there. My line is there, 2 centimeters, 2 centimeters there. And that's the thing. This is the line, but I've built a shape by adding mass or body to that line on either side. And so when I exit this, that's reflected in my new dimensions. It's not a 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter structure anymore or shape. It actually has changed dimensions here because I've added more mass or more shape to that plotted line. And in fact, instead of a 2 centimeter base or edge here, I've got a 2.2 centimeter base or 22 millimeter base. And again, it's because when it created that shape, it's added this additional mass to either side of my line. So just know that when you toggle into that open path shape, it is going to add some extra dimension to your shape. And of course, as you play around with that width, the more width, the larger the dimension. So you're going to have to account for that. Just keep in mind that all of these things I've been talking about also apply to Revolve Sketch. We've been spending a lot of time in Extrude Sketch, but Revolve Sketch essentially works the same way. The only difference here is that in Revolve Sketch, I'm only dealing with half of my screen here because this half is going to be basically spun around this center axis to create my shape. But all the tools and all of the things that we've done before in Extrude Sketch apply here. I have my increments down here in the lower right and the ability to create shapes, whether as a solid shape or an open path shape. And once I create that shape, if I want to re-edit those points, if I don't see that option here, I need to click either on this button, Edit, Modify Selected Shape, or I can just click on that shape and there are my points that I can then click and move around any way that I'd like. Double-clicking outside of that shape or clicking on the Close Edit tool brings me back to this shape and I can go back to editing this shape as one piece. All right, this tip is all about navigating your work plane. So let's drag out another sketch here. Let's drag out the Revolve Sketch, and you're going to notice that I have the ability to zoom in, zoom out, which is great. But I always find myself, as I start to make my sketch, before you know it, you start getting close to the edge here and you want to continue pushing upward. Now, For me, I always end up trying to scroll in and scroll out to try to see more of my screen. But you're going to notice here that it pretty much stays close to that edge and I can't really move away from that. And in fact, I end up kind of like shimmying back and forth until I actually get to the right spot. That gets frustrating really quick. What I had to learn though is that if I wanted to see more of this upper screen, let's say, I would need to zoom out with my mouse cursor towards the bottom of the screen. And as soon as I do that, you're going to notice that that really does open up that upper space a lot faster. Similarly, if I wanted to see down here towards the bottom of my screen or work plane, I would want to zoom out with the mouse cursor located at the top. And you'll notice there that I really start to zoom out and I can then open up more of that area underneath. And yes, this also applies to Extrude Sketch as well, because as you can see here, as I lay this down, I want to see more of that bottom screen. I just move my mouse up towards the top and then zoom out, and that really opens up that bottom area. Same thing here, if I want to move left to right, if I want to see more on the left here, I'm going to position my cursor on the right and then zoom out. That's really going to pull this back and I can see more of my screen towards the left, and I can zoom in and continue doing my work. It is definitely relearning how I use the mouse cursor and where I position the mouse cursor. But once I got the hang of it, boy, does it make it a lot faster and a lot less frustrating to try to reposition my view of my work plane. All right, so this next set of tips or tricks are really in the situation when you have other objects or shapes currently on your work plane and you want to add sketches to them. All right, so let's take out a sketch here. Let's drag one out. And you're going to notice that the sketch itself actually takes up a 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter area, or 20 millimeters by 20 millimeters. And I can try to place that, if I wanted to center it, as close as I can there, or maybe towards that edge there. And I release it. And what I love about Sketch is that you can see that we have our silhouette of the current shape that's already on our work plane. That's fantastic. Now, if I wanted to add a shape to this object by having it come off the side, I can certainly do that because I can see that shape silhouetted in the background. But here's the problem. Right now, I have my grid or work plane grid for my sketch nicely displayed here, and I have the settings to 1 millimeter. That's great because I can snap to those lines. But if I zoom in, the edge of my shape is not on one of those grid lines. Now, I can change my incrementation there and I can set it to off and basically try to really carefully place it so that it is on that edge. You can certainly do that, or the other thing I like to do is basically exit out of the sketch, like so, and just select those objects, because the sketch itself is still a shape, and that means that I can use something like the Align tool to align it along that edge. And when I do that and re-enter the sketch, I'm going to see here that I have that edge perfectly sitting on my grid line. And I know that if I were to do a sketch like this, and hit Finish Sketch, then I'm going to have my sketch perfectly aligned to the surface of that block. So yes, the Align tool is fantastic. Again, once I'm aligning these things, I can align these objects together along the edge of any one of these edges, along any one of these axes, or the midpoint. It's up to you, but it's a nice handy thing to be able to do and align those two together so that they align together on the grid when you're in Sketch. And again, I can do the same thing with Revolve Sketch. If I drag it out here. Chances are, though, is that because Sketch works by revolving around this center axis here, you're probably going to be using the alignment where you have them lined up along their centers. So again, I'm going to select both of them, hit Align. I'm going to keep my cylinder in place, and I'm going to align them by their center points. And now when I click out of this and re-enter my sketch, this is great because I know that any shape that I add onto this is going to be perfectly set up against the shape there that's currently on my work plane, so that when I exit out, and now I have to align them together like that and like that, that hole there is the perfect dimension for that cylinder because I had this sketch aligned to the center of that cylinder. Okay, this tip is more around Revolve Sketch. And again, let's bring out a Revolve Sketch here. And you can see again, I can see the silhouette of that block there. Now, you might find yourself in certain situations where I don't want to use this block as my reference. I actually wanted to use that cylinder. And your project may not allow you to simply just put the sketch in front of it. Just know though that this is a shape, and yes, that allows you to rotate it. So if I take this, I can rotate my sketch and it doesn't look like you're doing anything, but just know though that when I re-click on this, I now see that cylinder silhouette because I have rotated it so that it is facing that cylinder shape. And of course, don't forget, it's not just rotating it on that axis. Me taking this and rotating it on that axis does allow me to reposition this so that when I open it up, I can now create a shape that is coming off like that. Finish my sketch, and there you have it. So using Sketch is great because you can see those shapes in the background of your work plane. So I'm going to drag out the Revolve Sketch, but this would also apply to the Extrude Sketch as well, but I'm going to drop it right there. And you're going to notice that, yeah, you do see those objects, but once you start having objects starting to build on your plane, you're going to see all those objects. And it's not just the objects behind the sketch that you've placed, but also the objects or shapes in front of it as well. Now, this can become really confusing because let's say I just wanted to use my red block there as my guide or reference point for this sketch. But clicking on it, you can see that I have all these other shapes that are interfering with my ability to see that shape clearly, and it starts to get a little bit confusing. So this is what you can do instead. Finish the sketch, select the shapes or parts of your build that you don't want appearing in your sketch background, and then just hide them. Hide selected or Control H. Now when you do that, when you enter back into the sketch, those shapes are gone. This will keep things simple for you and hopefully allow you to clearly see the shape that you want to use as your reference as you create your sketch. Just don't forget that you need to unhide those shapes by pressing Control Shift H or the icon here along the top. All right, everybody, I think that's all I've got. I've gone through my list here. I hope that helps. And for those of you that are trying your best with Sketch and you're getting frustrated, keep at it. These two tools are absolutely fantastic. And I use them more and more with my builds and designs. And I really do hope that you find a lot of value in these tools because I certainly do. And I know many others are as well. All right, that's it for me. Until next time, take care, and we will see you on the next video.